I call to order the Town of Carver Capital Outlay Committee. Today is October 4th, 2021 at 7:02 p.m. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm assuming we don't have any public comment. Does anyone have anything? Okay, so before we get to the town administrator update, I just wanted to let you guys know what was in the packet that I brought for everybody. Do you want stuff for you too?
I'm sorry?
I have, if you want some too.
Oh,
I have
sure.
I didn't put enough. Okay, so I just wanted to let you know what was in here. So we have our agenda, meeting minutes from last week. We're going to go over this soon, but this is going to be the capital funding request form. And then there is a copy from the Finance Committee handbook on capital. So it's just one chapter of that handbook. If anybody wanted to take it home and read it, it's here for you. So, Rick, did you want to give us a town administrator update?
Sure. I'm going to, for the benefit of being on cable, I don't want to speak while I'm walking around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass this out, and then I'll tell you what it is, and then I'll take you through it.
Okay, thank you, Rick. It is, but we can just like focus to the left for tonight, you know? You don't worry about all those numbers.
Not all of it's necessarily relevant to me, but...
Like, no. I just don't want to run over the lines.
Okay, yes, Beth had asked me to kind of go through the funding sources and what the budget is for capital planning and why it is that, and maybe a little history. I met with Beth and Marie 2 weeks ago now to kind of just go through it real quickly. So let me just start with the first sheet that I passed out. Actually, at the top it says alternate Appendix D, and that is our revenue forecast for this FY 2022, which obviously leads into FY 2023. But the relevant part for capital outlay purposes, it's a little bit unique here. We have a capital stabilization trust fund. Most towns you'll have every year you'll have a budget, and then in the budget you'll specifically appropriate your debt and interest, and specifically appropriate each capital item. In Carver there's a capital stabilization trust fund. So at town meeting, funds are appropriated into the trust fund, and then immediately following, the funds are transferred out of the trust fund to pay for capital items. So a little bit of a unique practice, although in a sense it accomplishes the same thing with one fairly important nuance. And if you look at the second page of the revenue forecast, again, the one that starts alternate Appendix D. If you go down to, there's a number needed for current fiscal year capital plan. And I'll give you, look in the blue, it's $3,604,136. I'll give you a second to find that, everybody.
Very last line.
Well-
Yep.
Well, actually, it's in two places.
Oh, wait, I see it.
Yeah.
You're right.
Sure. Now, that's the number that we have FY '22, and that number is also, that's the amount that's expended for, that's the revenue piece, and it's also what's expended, and that covers the debt. We have the fixed debt interest, as well as the capital items that are appropriated for. Now, the history of this is that, oh God, about 10 years ago now, we started the capital trust fund, and we started segregating the growth in personal property taxes into a stabilization fund just for capital. Over the years, that became morphed into what is a larger capital stabilization trust fund. And the key point is that over the years, the debt and interest that the town had was transferred into the fund as a revenue source and then transferred out as an expenditure. But as a revenue source every year, the amount that was transferred in now was up to 2.5% was increased on that every year, which basically means that you're increasing your capital expenditure capacity every single year by the same as the tax levy, which again, that's not all that typical. So if you look at, again, the second page, transfers to capital stabilization, the revenue piece, and the 3516230, and then 2.5% increase, as if it's its own taxable income. It's not typical to add 2.5% every year to your overall revenue source, the capital. So that's a little bit of a nuance. So if you go down to the first 3604, okay, that carries above, and then it adds 2.5%, which is, again, another 90,000. So those are really the building blocks for how much is available every year for capital outlay. There are a couple other small nuances. There's a piece of our overall solar pilot money. 1/3 of that is part of this overall projection budget. But for the most part, it's the amount that has been segregated from the tax base plus 2.5% every year. So I'm going to just stick to the blue column right now. And I know there'll be questions, and some of this is going to have to sink in a little bit, so if we get the email on Wednesday, it's okay. If you go down to, further down the blue column, you've got the 3604 at the bottom under total transfer. Stay up. The two pieces of that, if you look above, are the existing debt, 1609. That's the existing debt for the high school, police, and fire departments. And the 1701, that's the amount that's available for new capital expenditures in FY '22. And that carries over, you've got your 2.5% on your revenue, plus you have the delta from declining debt. That is really the difference between the 3604 in FY '22 and the 3694 in FY 2023. So that's, when you look at all this paper, that's the essence of what creates the revenue piece for the capital stabilization fund. Any questions, Jim? Any questions at this juncture? Okay. So traditionally, in a lot of towns, and with fairly typical practice, that if you have, fixed debt, let's say you have a police station, and that debt obviously declines over some period of time, and, a good practice is to turn that, that delta as it's declining debt, to continue to use the declining debt delta for other capital, so that obviously if you have fixed costs that continue to decline, well, then when you need to borrow more funds for now you don't have any capacity to do that without taking it out of operating funds. So a general practice is to make sure that your existing capital plan, whatever that amount is, plus any debt, the reducing debt that you have goes into new capital. This is a little bit, the only real difference here is that you're doing the same thing in a little bit of a different form. and you're also building 2.5% on top of what you've segregated. So, and as you can see, it's pretty good money. And as your major debt decreases, that delta plus the 2.5% continues to grow your fund a little bit. Again, it's a simple concept, but it can be pretty confusing until you get used to it. So if you go to this other incredibly intimidating paperwork here, and for now, I'm just going to take you to the last page. And in the left-hand column, if you go 4 lines down, you see 3604,136. So, as you know, that number's pretty familiar because that's the piece on the revenue page. So the revenue for, it's different documents, but the revenue page ties to the capital page, as one would hope. So the 3604 for FY 2022, you are already aware that we already discussed that the fixed debt, the 1609, that's not an exact, down below at the bottom before the red, this I didn't organize the spreadsheet in this fashion. Might be revising it this year so it's easier to use from the outside looking in. But the 3604 minus the fixed debt and interest leaves an amount to be appropriated, the 1701, again, ties to the revenue page. That's the amount of the FY 2022 capital plan. So if you carry that out to 2023, and I'm going to go back to the revenue forecast, and obviously this will be updated as we move forward here. You're starting with the 3604 from this year. You're adding the 2.5% that's really tied to, as a model to the tax levy. So we have a new capacity of 3694,239. And from that, in yellow and orange, the 1573. Everybody seeing that? I know it's a lot of paperwork to look at. You see that? Okay, it's the that's the fixed debt. As you can see, it's declining a little bit from FY22. So the revenue minus the fixed debt equals the spending capacity this year of 3694,239. I mean, it's hard. I know it's hard to explain it for all these columns. So, but does everybody following the call? Go ahead.
What was the last number, Rick?
Now, if you look at the total transfer from capital stabilization, 3694,239.
Yeah, I see that.
Now you subtract down below. There's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down. There's the in orange, the 1573.
Yep, I see it.
That's the fixed debt for the police, fire, and middle school this year.
Okay.
And as you can see, it's reduced a little from the prior year, which is obviously typical. Debt tends to, it should reduce every year or you got a problem. And that's what leaves the capacity of 1824 over and above paying our debt. So that 1824 over and above the debt requirement is what's available for capital spending for FY 2023. Okay. Yeah, I mean, in a budget process, everything is subject to, to change and depending on the situation, but that's as we start the process, that's where we are. And last year, 1609, we did stick to the program in terms, we had to do some, you probably remember, Beth, from the Finance Committee and Marie from the Finance Committee, we had to do a little bit of moving and shaking, and moving stuff down columns, taking some, which is typical in a process, and moving some things down, reducing some of the expenditures. The library HVAC just being a good example, where there was a significant amount of funds dedicated on the revenue, on the capital outlay plan. However, we really didn't know what, this was a couple of years ago, just plugging numbers. So we ended up appropriating $50,000 for that piece, and we currently have the engineering going on right now so that we'll know at the next town meeting what we'll really need to spend, whether it's $250,000 or $2.5 million. I said somewhere between there, but rather than spend that kind of money, you know, at a moving target right now. So that's just an example of, you know, the conversation and the work you have to do to try to, just like a budget process, you have to make this number meet that, meet that. So going into FY 2023, we start with the capacity of about $1.8 million in new capital. Okay, are there specific questions on how the revenue works? And like I said, this took a little while for me to absorb, only because it's not the typical way that you would do this. I mean, it works quite well, obviously, but it's just a little bit of a, you know, moving money into a trust fund and then out of a trust fund versus just a basic appropriation using funds from the tax levy. It's a little bit of a different approach, but this is where it allows you to be disciplined with growing your available revenue by 2.5% every year.
So, and I think we did talk briefly, you, me, and Marie, that, you know, down the road, how long is this model going to be sustainable? Was the other thing, too. So, not this year, but in the future, we will have to look at it.
Sustainable, we did.
To keep adding back into the fund.
Right, and ultimately, it's a matter, too, where the rubber meets the road.
Exactly.
Right, and how much capital, you know, versus, you know, keeping essential operating services. That's ultimately, those are policy decisions ultimately down the road, but that's a good point, Beth. For now, there's a model. The model has worked to date. We don't know for certain with the state of the state we're in right now. We don't know if some of these, you know, last year, the state spent a lot of money holding municipal government reasonably harmless during the pandemic, but it also spent down its stabilization fund significantly. We can't necessarily expect that to continue. So it's very possible that our operating funds might be squeezed. Even if we're held harmless to a great extent, we're going to be squeezed probably for a couple of years now, which we all know when your fixed costs are increasing and your levy's limited, which again is not necessarily a bad thing. But your fixed costs are growing because they have to, and I say they have to because you know, a lot of the mandates we're under for benefits, et cetera, those don't go away just because state aid goes away. Not to get on my soapbox, but you have so many state laws that are not consistent. You know that the state's municipal finance regulations do not. They do not work well with labor and other types of, whether it's labor or environmental requirements. Those things that were supposed to be funded, Prop 2.5, which some of us still remember that. I was very, very young.
You know, I just wanted to put that out there because this model works. It works great, but it could be 3 years down the road.
Exactly.
From now. It may have to get revised or looked at.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I'm glad you bring it up because it's one thing to have fiscal policies, but ultimately, you know, town meeting can decide what town meeting wants to do, regardless of what we call a policy. So it's something to be cognizant of. And for instance, there's a piece of 1/3 of the pilot money from Stoller development goes into this fund. Now, it's not necessarily a significant piece of money, but it's, and one of the items we discussed last year with, just internally with the school administration and our finance team, you know, is to, you know, whether or not that piece of money is really necessary to the capital fund, only because, you know, when you really get down to the squeeze, you know.
Are you talking about the new school project down the line?
No, that's it. No, I'm talking about just in general. There's a third that is just available for general capital stabilization fund.
Right.
This is not the, you're talking about the piece that is used to offset additional debt and interest down the road for an additional school. That's what,
Isn't it set up in three sections, one for the capital stabilization fund, one for the potential new school down the line, new high school down the line? And then there was a third into OPEB?
correct.
Right.
Correct. So the question becomes, you know, the piece that would go to impact presumably lessen future debt. I mean, that's, I think we're at about $100,000 a year. But when you're looking at a school building project that's probably in the 60, 70, 80,000, $1 million range, are those funds really of any value in that context? So I'm not saying yes, I'm just saying as an example, those are the types of things that may become, policy issues or recommendations down the road. So not saying it is this year, but I just want to, jumping on what Beth said, these are things that might be something we've got to talk about in the future.
So I guess just to look at it a different way too, if you look at the first sheet, the revenue sheet, I guess what I'm talking about is if you see the 3604 here in the middle of the sheet, which it's transferred to the capital stabilization fund, it's kind of high up on the sheet. Do you know what I mean? So this is all the revenue. Yeah.
Right, now I got to follow you, Beth.
Do you know what I mean? So what I'm...
And transfers to other funds.
Yeah, so just what I'm looking at is this is all the money that comes in, the 40, you get to total revenue, the 44 million. Then you take, the rest of the, see, then you got all your fixed liabilities, so I have to come off of that. There's 2,073,000. The next line is the 3,006,000. That's what's going to get put out to our capital fund.
Right.
After that, then you come to the North Carver Water District, the OPEB fund, and everything else that's going to come out. So our capital line item is high up as a higher priority in
Yeah.
some other areas. That's all I mean.
No, it's a good
It's
point, because when you actually get down to operating dollars,
Exactly.
that's a healthy chunk of money that's coming out of the tax levy for
capital.
right.
Which I'm happy, I love the town's buying capital. I'm just want to make sure that as a group that we're aware, this is, a higher priority item on this sheet, not the highest, but it's just up
Sure.
there. Maybe in a few years from now, can we still, afford to have this high in our sheet? I just want to make sure that's out there.
Yeah.
And the numbers aren't populated for those thirds for middle high school
No.
reconstruction and unfunded
Yeah, they're-
for OPEB.
Yeah, there,
Yeah, OPEB,
yeah.
this one here.
So you won't know that till later in the
they're-
forecast, right?
It's in here somewhere,
It's in
trust
here.
me.
Yeah,
Don't-
so-
it's-
okay, here we
yeah,
go.
it's not
295,
the big money we're talking about,
Right.
but it is populated in some of
Yeah.
these other areas, so.
Okay.
So, and then after that, then you get to all your expenditures, you have what's left for the town, and then you take the town share and then the school share. So do you remember the capital's even coming out before the town has their share or the school's their share?
Right, so when you look at, basically $35 million operating budget for the town and the school, and considering that those include the fixed costs, okay, health insurance, et cetera, $3.6 million, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. Not good or bad, again, just in terms of, from a policy standpoint. And I don't want to, one of the things that I've heard, and I'm sure some of you have heard, now granted, this money is revenue and it's expended for certain items, for certain purposes, but effectively it goes into a stabilization fund, a savings account. And one of the points that has come up over the years is, well, I pay my taxes. Do I pay my taxes so you can save it? Well, my kid has 48 kids in a class, and that's not accurate. That's an example. Please don't anybody. But that's, again, those are ultimately policy decisions, and, we're not there yet, but FY 2023, we really don't know what to expect right now. Again, we can't expect that the state's going to hold us harmless again. Hopefully that would be nice. But you can't use, $1 billion+ from the state's rainy day fund just to hold harmless in 1 year and expect that that's going to continue indefinitely. So it's just a lot of unknown right now. But that being said, I mean, the model is the model, and I think we have to presume to live within the model.
Absolutely. It's nice that we have this model, I think, as a group, because the money's there and it's already set aside. But I just want to, and I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer about it, I just want to make sure everyone's aware, this could, in a few years from now, be something we're looking at.
Well, I think it better be realistic, sure, yeah.
I mean, there's been talk about altering the percentage going into the capital stabilization fund for a while now and seeing what that would bring, but that's discussions on, from different committees to make decisions on, and set policy on, maybe find at least a town meeting. You know, but this fund was the reason, if you don't, I mean, I'm sure you all know here, but in case anyone's watching, I mean, this fund is the reason why we've had a new police station, a new fire station, repairs to the middle high school, the new sports complex at the middle high school, and a lot of things in the town that we haven't had to have a huge tax increase over. You know, no 2.5 overrides. I mean, the only thing that we had to do a debt exclusion on was the elementary school, because it was just too big. You know, so it couldn't fall under this. You know, but this fund has been the reason we've had all these things built in town infrastructure with only a 2.5 increase in people's property tax bill every year, which I don't like seeing as much as anybody else, but we have gotten, you hear people say, well, we don't get anything for our taxes in Carver. That's not true. I mean, we've got a lot of new infrastructure in the town. You know, the park over here, you know, so anyway, just wanted to bring that point up.
Rick, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I know you've probably explained it before. Bear with me. On the Delta figures on the second page here, explain those again, and
Okay.
I just would like a little more
Sure.
explanation for my...
Right, okay. Again, keep in mind, you're starting with, I'm going to go back. Whoops. Okay, we'll use FY 2022, the current fiscal year, as the starting point. So the amount that's available, the 3604, that is the amount that's available revenue, okay, which corresponds to the target expenditure. Now, the target expenditure includes two pieces. One is the fixed debt and interest that we have to pay on outstanding projects. That's the 1.649. I'm sorry, I want to make sure that's correct. The other piece, annual target funds available, 17 that is the amount, the 1.6 is existing debt and interest that we have to pay. The balance, 1.7, is the amount that the outstanding, the requests, 1.7. So the delta, meaning between the 3604 and add the 1.6 and the 1.7, the delta is $51,000. So that's a fake number, because as the process went on, you know, certain, you end up actually having to cut back on projects, you know, and expenses, and move, you know, being a little more creative with them. So, yeah, so that's really, it's math, but it's not a real number, you know, by the time we get through the end of the process. So that's why you go into FY 2023, and you see negative 643. So like I say, it's a model. It's a model, but it's a model that's based on a fairly consistent revenue piece.
Yeah, so this is how I would sometimes do it in my job. So if I had, say, I knew I had $1.7 million to spend, but all the requests came in at $1.649 million, so that the delta is almost the 52,000. I would take that, if I didn't have all these other requests at the bottom, and put it into like a contingency fund for a request that came through.
Yeah,
and have a little money.
And there may be, we may want to talk about this, Beth, and see if there's a different way you want to organize this, because I'm not sure that I would organize it this way, but I know that's what town was used to seeing. But the town meeting, you know, capital outlay, finance committee. But as most of you probably recall, last year's capital outlay committee really wasn't, it was really defunct, because, we were able to reorganize it in a way that's more sustainable. So I don't know that, other than as an internal tool, a lot of this information, again, is something between 4 or 5 of us that we understood the way we look at it. I don't know that it's as user-friendly as maybe we could make it for external use instead of just internal use only.
Yeah,
So, I mean, we can talk about that. So, because it brings up a good point. I mean, what should be a relatively easy thing to see, if you don't know how this is set up, it's a little confusing. So. So that's the delta
Good
piece,
question.
and like I said, that's more of a, it's mere projection going forward, and and I know you probably already know this, but anytime we do any kind of a forecast, whether it's a 5-year revenue expenditure or a 10-year revenue, I mean, they're only as good usually as a year or two, and, those longer-term numbers are helpful to see, but as you know, as you get every year out, they just get more and more speculative, so, so that's why these numbers look so daunting. But they have to look daunting because you almost have to presume the worst in both your revenue side and your expenditure needs. Anything else, Marie, did I answer your question?
Thank you so far. Right.
Okay,
I think I
all right.
understand that. Thanks for, makes,
Yeah, and again, we can work on this, Beth, to, internally with, you, me, and Sue, maybe there's a better way to look at this for everybody.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and thank you for taking the time to explain it. I wanted to make sure we were all on the same page with this tonight. 'cause
it's
like our first-
confusing.
yeah.
I've seen these many years.
You have, okay.
Oh, yeah, so you're used to the format then, Andy?
I'm used to this, yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Kind of, but
Yeah.
I still like, well, it doesn't help that I forgot my glasses tonight. But I can still,
Yeah, so you can't see a thing.
my arms are just long enough.
Want me to hold it?
I just need cheetahs, it's all right.
I can run down the hall with that if you'd like.
Yeah.
You can see it.
But, when you think about, I meant to mention it earlier, in case anyone doesn't know, that if you look at the annual total request for a year, all it is really the columns added up for requests for departments, for their capital requests, for fiscal year.
Yeah.
But I like that tool, actually.
Which one, Andy?
Well, just on the final page, is the amount total request is.
Yes.
is good for 22 is 1649703. But really, what all that is, if I'm not
It's just,
mistaken,
yeah.
is the adding up
Sure.
of requests for fiscal year
Right.
22.
And
Right, so that, the easiest part of this is squeezing annual total requests into the 3604. I mean, that's,
Yep.
in terms of a model, that's the easy thing to see. Now, doing it is it's a different problem, but at least understanding what that is, minus the bottom line before the red, which is the fixed debt and interest, that's the piece that we're trying to work the overall program into every year.
And I just wanted to point out, because the very first time I ever saw the sheet was at the Finance Committee. If the number has a K at the end, that does not subtotal to the bottom.
Oh,
Just because I
Right.
sat there with my calculator
Yes,
that night. and I was
sure.
like, this doesn't add.
There was a code on that, I remember that.
Yeah.
That's something that wasn't going to be in the.
So,
K, on the number itself.
yeah, so if you go to like the North Carver Water District, you'll see that has a K at the end. So that's technically not in there. It's on the sheet for
Sure.
everybody, but it's not in the total.
And EMS, purchase of an ambulance or ambulance equipment, that comes out of the enterprise fund. So it's on the list, but as Beth said, it doesn't accrue to the bottom line within the available
They
funds.
basically self-finance, right?
You crystallized my thoughts, Andy. That's exactly right. Yes.
Well, just if you're like me, if you're trying to make sure it floods, it's not going to flood
Sure,
if you have that.
sure. And you know what, that's actually a good point, Beth. It may very well be that those items should be separated maybe at the bottom of this instead of,
Yeah.
having to go back and forth. So
That's
that might be another thing we want to look at.
Sure. Yeah, that was the very first time I ever saw the sheet. That was the first thing that stuck out to me.
Yeah, like the one right here for North Carver Water District,
Yeah,
190K.
yeah. Yeah, that wouldn't add up to the top.
Right. Okay, so we get to the columns, and I don't think we, if you want to go through them a little bit, but again, the FY '22 is what's on the books, and it accrues to that bottom line. Now, going forward, I think it's a matter of setting dates and parameters for departmental requests, because, let's face it, the FY23 column is going to change, maybe change significantly to get to the bottom line that we've already identified. So how and when you want to go about that, we used the month of November to send out requests and get them back by the end of that month.
Yeah. So that would be these sheets that we had in the packet. These are going to go out to the department heads to fill out in the month of November. So we could come up with a date, like Rick was just saying, to meet, would probably after they're all done, or maybe as they're finishing, maybe between the end of November and December to go through them.
You still have, I know it stopped for a while, but have the interviews with the finance committee and department heads started again?
Not yet, not yet.
Is
The
that
budget,
something-
the budget process will be, we're already doing some preliminary, number crunching, but those requests will be going out probably before the end of the month, so.
'Cause I remember when I was on the finance committee, when you were here the last time, we would separate out, each member would have certain department heads.
Yeah, well, like liaisons.
With liaisons
Yeah.
or something between
Yeah.
them.
Sure.
And you go and ask them like what their wish list was and how their budget was going, how's everything going with their department,
Yeah.
that type of thing, and then we'd have a maybe come in front of the committee.
So what they do now, or what I've been on that committee for past few years,
Yeah.
they come to us. It usually starts around January, and each department head comes in and tells us what their wish list
Oh, okay.
is and what's on their budget. We don't usually go to them, they come to the meeting.
Right.
So we could do the
Same
same
results, I
model.
guess.
Yeah. We could do the same model and have the department heads come here for the capital.
Yes.
I was
yes.
assuming that's what we're gonna do.
Right, I think that's more effective than having them try to discuss their capital while they're on with the finance committee.
Yeah.
But that's, again, that was really a product of having more of a capital outlay committee that had slowly becoming defunct over years, because to the extent that you have, too many at-large people on there, that can get, as you know, getting people to volunteer, that can be difficult. Getting people that feel invested in volunteering can be a little bit difficult, so to have the structure here is a little bit more conducive to kind of really a long-term. I think we had a lot of great people for a long time, and I guess I can't help but kind of give the kudos right now to Mr. Jack Angley, who passed away recently, and I think Mr. Angley was one of the, may have been the person that began a very robust capital plan, I think, probably back in the 80s. And at that time, the Capital Outlay Committee was really the driving committee in town, really, even more than the finance committee at the time. And again, as time went on, we had some really, really great people on the finance committees, as you probably know, Steve Pratt, Dan Ryan, and a whole bunch of them. So, but there was a time when capital was king, and again, Jack was the foremost king, I would say. So those of you who know Jack,
I was sad to hear that, I just heard that the other day.
Yeah. So I think, to your point, I think that, you really do have to separate the capital from the operating, because it's hard for somebody to come in here and be, and discuss all this with the finance committee. Because discussing, a $2 million piece of fire apparatus, that kind of requires its own conversation. When you have a piece of apparatus that's more than 2 times the cost of the operating budget. So I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, so I think that will be our plan for this year, if you guys are good with that. I'm just not sure when we should start. Do we give them the whole month to finish it?
Well, last year we gave them November, and then we
Okay.
began our discussions in December. Now, keeping in mind, there's not that many departments with the big capital stuff, but, you could spend a whole night talking to the fire department, though, but you'll probably need a half a dozen evenings.
Okay.
That's what I would think. Maybe less. I think it depends on what comes in the door. And keep in mind, too, that over the years, somebody comes in with a request that may be a year or two down the road, and you have some discussions about that, so, the year it might be on the list, it's not new to you. You know, so I see like on here, for instance, I forget what year, but there's a request, which is, I think, more of a projection, you know, for a used tower truck, or aerial, not tower truck, aerial truck. For the fire department. Well, that's something that may be part of a mitigation plan with the Route 44 project. So the dynamics can change significantly every year, which is obviously why when you look out 2 or 3, 4 years, it's, it's not going to look the same as you get there. So, and I say that because although there's a common sense element to that, I know from doing a lot of revenue expenditure projections over the years, there's been times where somebody wants to hold you to what you said 4 years ago. Well, it doesn't work that way. So I know it might seem a little bit obvious to us, but it may not be to everybody. So there's always that disclaimer. So if that works for you,
Yeah.
November to November, we can certainly, and again, feel free to rely on me and our office for
Absolutely.
for pushing paper, collecting, whatever you, scheduling, because there's nothing worse than scheduling. So you whatever you need, Beth.
Okay. Do you guys want to set a date tonight for our next meeting? Or is this too soon? You guys good?
I just had a quick question. So
Yeah.
on this sheet, the final Carver capital plan, so the things that are on the far left, are those that have been presented over the last few years that don't ever acted upon? Because you had mentioned, Rick, that sometimes it's a few years down the line. So some of these,
Which you're looking for, like the
things that are in the
FY22?
so like some of the things that have no number.
I see, okay, yes, these are items that have been projected, so, in the past.
So a
that-
department has actually submitted this request in the past,
Correct,
just haven't been acted
right.
on.
Now, exactly.
Like the Skag mower, is that one of the ones you'd be looking at?
Yeah.
On the
And-
last
Yeah.
sheet?
Yeah,
So yes, they probably brought this up a couple of years ago, that every other year we need to buy one,
Right.
and it must be increasing in cost. So 10,000 in '24, 11,000 '26, 12,000 '28. So I think they're just projecting out if I get one every 2 years.
no, actually, that
Oh,
would
it's
be
not?
projecting a replacement of, that is not, a projected inflation. That's what.
That's the exact amount. Okay.
Yes, now again, keeping in mind, as, this is what a department head a few years ago looked at and thought, this may be what I need, that ultimately may not be what the department head needs. It might be a bigger machine less often, but I think that's what, that's why, again, it's got to be updated every single year. And I also know and I don't want to speak for my predecessor, but I've been in a situation where, especially when you don't have an active capital outlay committee, a lot of this has to be more of a, what is the town administrator in conversation with the department heads, what do they think? Because you really don't have an independent, body going through all this work and interviews, so I don't want to speak to Jim to how, obviously these were proposed by somebody at some point in time, but I don't know if this was, coming just from my predecessor and his thoughts, or if it was how in-depth with department heads. I don't know, but I assume all of these were proposed ultimately by a department head specifically.
Well,
We can ask.
the thing is that you'll see when you get their request back, if some of these items are pushed, come earlier, exactly, come forward.
Yeah.
Or maybe not, during the interview time, well, what about these, can these wait,
Yeah.
how's this equipment really, that type of thing.
Right, and because, last year, there was a bus replacement schedule. I think you remember this, Beth and Marie, this was a fairly active conversation, and the fact that the buses weren't running as often because of, school being out, that, okay, well, we can put that off a year or two, we can move this down the road, so yeah, what I think is always interesting is when department heads come in and with requests that aren't on this at all. That's always, but there's usually a good reason for it. But that's, we're going to see that. But there's, again, usually, there's obviously a very good reason for that usually, so. So we will be
So,
presumed to get these requests out by the beginning of the month, with the deadline the end of the month.
Perfect.
Okay.
That would be great. And then we'll meet in December, and we'll wait till I talk to you, or we'll find out
Sure.
who we want to bring in first. Maybe whoever finished theirs first. We can start that way and keep the bigger ones, maybe to 1 or 2 on a night.
Right.
Sounds good.
That work?
Sound good?
So pick a date.
Yeah.
So we're doing, what are we doing, monthly? Or are we doing, how often are we meeting?
Well, I'm thinking December and January is
They're
going to be a
busy.
few times.
Sure,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
More, but, and then it will
Yeah.
trickle down. I know December's holidays. Is there a night of the week that anyone can't do or is better?
Any night except Wednesday would be a little better for me, but, and that's flexible.
Okay.
Mondays I have school committee, but it's only once a month unless we have special meetings.
Okay.
You know, so, and what do you have, Tuesday?
Tuesday.
Yeah.
Tuesday.
But I can do anything really, so it's fine.
How about a Thursday? Would that,
Thursday, December,
you want to start right off on the 2nd?
yeah.
Is that
Are we doing
okay?
this, are we doing one for November?
They're going to be compiling them in November.
Oh,
Yes.
So I figured we won't have much to meet on.
Okay.
We can meet if you guys would like to, but we wouldn't be meeting with anyone. That would be in December.
It's fine. I mean, if you think we need one, then I'm sure we can be available. but-
Yeah.
Yeah.
But December 2nd works for me,
Me
it's
too.
Thursday.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So let's do that, and I'll reach out to Elaine, see if the room's available.
Sure. Yeah, I mean,
Same time,
the only thing I could see maybe coming up, Andy, is if there's some sort of, you know, we'll call it an emergency of some sort, where, you know, there's a piece of apparatus, God only knows what it could be, that might be, you know, have to be considered earlier rather than later, but I think that would be highly unusual, so.
Okay. Now, I have one more question just on the process, and just a confirmation. When I was at the tail end of my time on the Finance Committee, one of the things that we proposed, actually it was between Ron Clark and I, we came up with an idea for any expenditure of the Capital Outlay Committee over a certain dollar amount, which I cannot remember right now, they had to have the approval of the Finance Committee. Is that still in effect? Is that still, do you know if that's still in effect?
I haven't heard of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can,
well, that's not, the Finance Committee ultimately is responsible for making a recommendation to town meeting, and that recommendation ultimately is really not limited to just the operating budget. So I believe that the Finance Committee has the ability and the responsibility to make a recommendation on the capital plan, too. Even though, and one of the things that changed recently with the latest bylaw change, the former bylaw specifically said that Capital Outlay Committee would make a report to town meeting, which is fine, except that the recommendations capital outlay recommendations, they have to be part of the whole. And I think that's why I know that's why we changed it in this the bylaw update, because you obviously can't have two competing, financial boards at town meeting. I know it hasn't been the case where there's been that type of infighting or disagreements, but if you're going to update the bylaw, you want to do it. And last year, because the Finance Committee really essentially acted like a capital outlay
did.
committee.
we did do the
So-
voting last year. for
Yeah.
them.
So maybe that's why you didn't see it.
That's, yeah.
Right, but
Is there a way to check that? I'm not sure if that got voted on town meeting, or if that was something that the Board of Selectmen agreed to. Because I remember we did it in this room, and I forgot the level. And the reason we did it was because we felt that the Finance Committee, they at the time, we had the financials all the time of every department. So if someone came and asked for some type of request, we could see what was going on in their budget. So it was up to the Finance Committee to sign off on it.
Sure.
See if they really needed it,
Right.
not just a department come up and saying, well, I need $50,000 for this. Oh, you have $60,000 left in your budget for this year, or that type of thing,
Well, with regard, again, just from a bureaucratic standpoint, the Finance Committee should be making a recommendation on the capital plan. Capital Outlay Committee would make a recommendation to the Finance Committee and the Board, and the Finance Committee and the Board ultimately have the responsibility to make an overall recommendation, so, and I think that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be, not different authorities making perhaps different reports to town meeting. That's not good.
I think at the time, the Capital Outlay Committee had more power, more authority to make, okay, this is our recommendation, and the selectmen and kind of, they went with that recommendation, and town meeting went with that recommendation as well, so.
And I think that was a matter of just influence over the years.
Right.
It wasn't so much of a organizational matter, it was just you had a lot of people who had been on the committee for a long time, and they just had a lot of influence.
Right.
So I don't think that, so I think in terms of a model, I think this is really works best.
I think the capital outlay usually be at the town meeting. They're their own section on table, kind of similar to what the school committee, finance committee, select board.
That's the way, my recollection is that's the way it used to be, yeah.
The first time I went to the town meeting, there was one person there from Capital Outlay. And then the next year, there was not anyone. And then last year, I don't think there was anyone
Sure.
either from Capital.
Well, also keeping in mind that
COVID.
all of you serve on other boards, so
Yeah.
you're going to be up there in some capacity anyway, so where do you want to
I was
sit?
just referring to what you had said, where they had a lot more power, if you will, back then.
Yeah, a lot of,
I
yeah,
remember
sure,
Seeing Jack Angley up there.
Yeah.
yeah.
On the
But now you'd hear him, that he'd be introduced, and then he would introduce the members of the Capital Outlay,
Yeah.
but they'd be all over the place, because they'd be up
Okay,
on different
fair enough.
tables,
Yeah.
more for the most part.
Right. Because didn't they vote, was their vote recorded as far as on the warrant? But the money articles?
Usually.
It would say
It's on
capital outlay, and
a
it
couple of
says-
them, yeah.
I believe so,
Yeah.
Jim, yeah.
Yeah, because I know last year that I think the finance committee voted for them
Right,
on
because
some
there
of them.
wasn't really one.
And we did that at the very end.
Sure.
We
Right.
weren't sure where it was going to go.
So will budget items come through this again, or will the finance committee take over that as far as for the warrant articles, that type of stuff?
What you're talking about on capital items, you're talking
Right.
about? Yeah, capital items will come through this group will make a recommendation to, finance committee and the select board, and then presumably everybody's in some semblance of agreement, and that's what's all recommended at town meeting.
Okay.
So it starts here, pretty much, so.
Thanks,
Yeah, that's
Rick.
the way it
We're all
was.
new at this.
Huh?
I said, we're all new at this. Thank you.
Well, yeah, this is kind of going back in time, the way it
Yeah,
used to be, which again, this is the way, in my opinion, this is the way it's supposed to be. I think the last few years, it's been a little bit difficult, because as some of your members fall off over the years, like anything, you have a lot of institutional memory, too. So that's difficult to lose, but in 20 years, you'll be the institutional memory.
Well, those people, they put in a lot of years and a lot of dedication to the
Yeah.
town, so, like Mr. Angley, Mr. President Merritt.
Yeah. So then do you have any questions, recommendations about the forms themselves, or?
I don't, I think that since all the department heads are used to this form,
Yeah.
we shouldn't just jump in and make a change to it. I thought we should, at least for this year, stick with the form.
Yeah, okay.
It seems very self-explanatory.
And I would say that in the meantime, if anybody, if you're reviewing the financial format, you should let us know, because Beth, if you and me and Sue want to get together, if you look at this and say, geez, it would make more sense to me this way, like as we discussed, having your self-funding departments, enterprise funds, in a different section here, so that you don't have to use the calculator. I mean, that may be. That might be, or again, some of how you derive the annual budget for capital.
Sure.
If that's something that you want to change because it provides more clarity for people. Like I said, we get used to looking at something and we know what it means. But that's natural, but that doesn't mean a third party's going to know what it means unless you give them a tutorial.
Yeah.
So if you give some thought to that, and we can
Absolutely.
sit down in the meantime and
Okay,
see what
yeah,
makes
absolutely. I'll go
sense.
through it, and if anybody else,
Yeah.
if you guys think so. Absolutely, oh yeah. But if you guys had any suggestions, also send them to me, so that we can all be in unison.
Yeah. What a giant K next to it.
Right.
Yeah, because I really sat here down and I asked, it was Mike Malinowski, it just
Yeah.
doesn't foot.
Yeah, that's
bottom.
right, so, yeah, you shouldn't have to have a lot of history to do math.
Yeah,
I mean, math should pretty much work.
yeah, that's how I caught on, there was,
Yeah.
the Ks don't foot to the bottom, just in case anyone else tried it. Okay, thanks, Rick. So do you guys want to take a motion on the minutes from our last meeting?
I make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes of the June 9th, 2021 meeting.
Second.
Okay, motion made in second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it, 4-0. I think that is the last thing. Anyone have anything else for tonight?
Not me.
Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
We have a motion made to adjourn and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the ayes have it. Have a good night.
Was it 8?